In 1979, construction workers in Berlin thought they had struck gold when their excavators hit what appeared to be a buried concrete structure. What they uncovered instead would haunt investigators for decades. Deep beneath the bustling streets of modern Germany lay remnants of a nightmare that the world thought it had left behind. This discovery was just the beginning. Since the end of World War II, countless expeditions, construction projects, and accidental excavations have unearthed secrets that Nazi Germany desperately tried to hide. From underground complexes stretching for miles beneath the earth to laboratories where humanity's darkest experiments took place, these discoveries paint a picture of a regime whose true horror was far worse than anyone imagined. Today, we're taking you into the depths of these terrifying findings. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the scope and scale of Nazi operations during the war. Deep in the Harz Mountains of central Germany lies a discovery that left even seasoned historians speechless. In 1945, Allied forces stumbled upon what appeared to be a modest industrial facility. But as they ventured deeper into the mountainside, they realized they had found something far more sinister, an entire underground city dedicated to death and production. The Middlever complex, also known as Dora Mittelbau, stretched over 20 miles through solid rock. When American troops first entered these tunnels, the stench of death was overwhelming. Bodies were stacked like cordwood in some chambers, while others contained sophisticated rocket assembly lines where Germany's V-2 rockets were manufactured. What made this discovery particularly horrifying was the realization of how this massive complex was built. Over 60,000 prisoners, primarily from concentration camps, had been forced to excavate these tunnels using only hand tools and primitive equipment. The working conditions were deliberately lethal. Prisoners received minimal food, worked 18-hour shifts, and slept in chambers carved directly from the rock without proper ventilation or sanitation. The scale of the excavation was staggering. Engineers estimated that over 2 million tons of rock had been removed by hand, carried out in small buckets and wheelbarrows. The precision of the tunneling suggested expert mining knowledge, but records indicated that most of the actual digging was done by prisoners with no previous experience. The death toll from cave-ins, exhaustion, and deliberate execution was methodically documented in files that survived the war. The tunnels themselves told a story of calculated cruelty. Main production areas were spacious and well-lit for maximum efficiency, while prisoner quarters were deliberately cramped and poorly ventilated. Separate chambers served as execution sites, their walls still bearing bullet holes and dark stains when discovered decades later. The contrast was deliberate. Nazi engineers had created spaces designed for maximum productivity, alongside spaces designed for maximum suffering. Temperature control throughout the complex revealed another layer of cruelty. Production areas were heated to maintain optimal working conditions for the sensitive rocket components, while prisoner areas were left unheated. Winter temperatures in the mountain tunnels regularly dropped below freezing, adding exposure to the list of factors that killed workers systematically. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Nordhausen was its dual purpose. While the world knew about concentration camps, this complex revealed something far more sophisticated, an integration of mass murder with advanced weapons production. The same hands that were worked to death were building the rockets that would terrorize London. Production schedules found in the facility showed quotas that were impossible to meet without literally working people to death. The rocket production itself was remarkable for its complexity. V-2 rockets required precision manufacturing of thousands of components, from guidance systems to fuel injection mechanisms. Yet this intricate work was being performed by starving, exhausted prisoners under the supervision of engineers who viewed human life as a consumable resource. Investigation of the complex continued well into the 1990s, with new chambers and tunnels discovered regularly. Each excavation revealed more evidence of the systematic nature of Nazi planning. Detailed blueprints found in sealed chambers showed plans for expansion that would have created an underground industrial city spanning hundreds of miles. The plans included residential areas, administrative complexes, and even recreational facilities, all designed to support a permanent underground population. Underground railways connected different sections of the complex, with stations carved directly from the rock. These railways were used to transport both materials and human cargo throughout the facility. The engineering required to create these transportation networks while maintaining secrecy above ground demonstrated a level of planning that extended years into the future. The documentation found at Nordhausen was particularly disturbing. Meticulous records detailed not just production quotas for rockets, but also mortality rates among workers, calculated to maintain optimal production while ensuring a steady turnover of labor. Human lives were literally factored into production equations, with mathematical formulas determining the optimal balance between work output and worker survival. Medical facilities within the complex were designed not to heal, but to determine fitness for work. Prisoners who became too weak to be productive were systematically eliminated, while those who retained strength were assigned to the most dangerous tasks. The medical records found in these facilities documented deliberate negligence and active harm rather than treatment. Storage areas discovered in the 1980s contained personal belongings of thousands of victims: glasses, shoes, clothing, and personal items that had been systematically collected and cataloged. The organization of these items revealed a bureaucratic approach to mass murder that treated human possessions as inventory to be managed and distributed. But the horrors beneath Nordhausen were just a preview of what searchers would find in the decades to come. Hidden in the forests of Poland, an even more sinister discovery awaited: a facility where the boundaries between science and sadism had been completely erased. In 1963, a Polish farmer expanding his property line made a discovery that would shock the international community. What appeared to be a simple concrete slab buried beneath decades of forest growth was actually the entrance to one of Nazi Germany's most secretive medical facilities. The complex, later identified as a satellite facility connected to Auschwitz, contained research laboratories that pushed the boundaries of human experimentation beyond anything previously documented. When investigators finally gained access to the sealed chambers, they found detailed documentation of procedures that seemed to come from science fiction rather than medical research. The facility's entrance had been carefully concealed beneath what appeared to be natural forest floor. Sophisticated camouflage techniques had hidden ventilation systems, drainage, and access points for over 2 decades. The deception was so complete that local residents had walked over the facility for years without suspecting its existence. The laboratory spaces were remarkably preserved, with examination tables, surgical instruments, and observation equipment still in place. Climate control systems had maintained stable temperature and humidity, preserving not just equipment but also biological samples and documentation that would have otherwise deteriorated. The preservation was so complete that some equipment could still be operated when investigators arrived. But it was the documentation that provided the most disturbing insights. Thousands of pages of research notes detailed experiments designed to test the limits of human endurance, pain tolerance, and biological manipulation. The clinical language of these reports made them even more horrifying. Human suffering was reduced to data points and statistical observations, with researchers noting reactions to various stimuli with the same detachment they might use to describe chemical reactions. One series of experiments focused on hypothermia research, where subjects were systematically exposed to freezing temperatures, while researchers documented the progression of tissue death and organ failure. The research apparatus included precise temperature control systems, monitoring equipment to track vital signs, and detailed protocols for documenting the stages of hypothermia-induced death. The researchers had even developed mathematical models to predict survival times under different conditions. Immersion tanks filled with ice water were still present in the facility, along with detailed charts showing optimal water temperatures and exposure times for different research objectives. Recovery procedures were also documented, revealing that some subjects were deliberately revived and then re-exposed to gather data on repeated trauma effects. Another section of the facility was dedicated to high-altitude experiments. A massive pressure chamber, still functional when discovered, was used to simulate the effects of extreme altitude on human subjects. The chamber could simulate altitudes up to 70,000 feet, far beyond what any human could naturally survive. Control panels still showed the last settings used, frozen in time from the facility's final days of operation. The research protocols for these experiments were methodically organized. Different ethnic groups were subjected to different experimental procedures, with researchers maintaining detailed comparison charts to document variations in physiological responses. The systematic nature of this categorization revealed the racial ideology that drove the research programs. Perhaps most disturbing were the genetic experiments. Laboratory equipment for blood analysis, tissue sampling, and surgical procedures suggested research into human breeding and genetic manipulation. Charts on the walls detailed physical measurements and characteristics of different ethnic groups, with notations that implied attempts to categorize and rank human populations based on supposed genetic superiority. Surgical suites within the facility contained equipment for procedures that went far beyond medical necessity. Operating tables with restraint systems, specialized instruments for particular types of procedures, and detailed surgical protocols suggested experiments designed to alter human physiology in specific ways. Recovery rooms were equipped with monitoring equipment to track the effects of these procedures over extended periods. The genetic research areas contained extensive biological sample collections. Preserved organs, tissue samples, and blood specimens were cataloged with meticulous detail, cross-referenced with subject identification numbers and experimental protocols. Some samples were accompanied by detailed family history information, suggesting multi-generational research projects. Breeding program documentation found in secure filing cabinets outlined plans for selective reproduction designed to enhance particular physical and mental characteristics. The research included detailed psychological profiles, intelligence measurements, and physical capability assessments that were used to determine suitability for breeding programs. The preservation of this facility was remarkable and troubling. Unlike many Nazi installations that were hastily destroyed at war's end, this laboratory appeared to have been carefully sealed and hidden. Temperature-controlled storage areas contained biological samples that remained viable decades after the war ended. The careful preservation suggested that researchers had intended to return and continue their work. Documents found in waterproof containers provided insight into the scope of the research network. This facility was apparently one of dozens of similar installations, connected by a communication system that allowed researchers to share findings and coordinate experiments across occupied territories. Research results were compiled and distributed through secure channels to other facilities throughout the Nazi network. Communication logs revealed regular contact with similar facilities across Europe. Research findings, experimental subjects, and specialized equipment were regularly transferred between installations to maximize the scope and efficiency of the research programs. The coordination between facilities suggested central planning and oversight that extended to the highest levels of Nazi leadership. The international implications of these discoveries were staggering. Medical equipment bore markings from companies that continued operating after the war, raising questions about corporate knowledge and complicity. Some of the research techniques documented in these facilities would later be recognized in post-war medical literature, suggesting that some of this research found its way into legitimate medical practice through channels that remain unclear. Personnel files found in the facility identified researchers, technicians, and administrators who had worked in the installation. Many of these individuals had successfully obtained new identities after the war and continued careers in medical research in various countries. The discovery of these files led to investigations that continued for decades as authorities attempted to track down surviving perpetrators. But as investigators would soon learn, the medical horrors were only part of a much larger network of hidden facilities. Deep in the Austrian Alps, another discovery would reveal the true scope of Nazi ambitions and their plans for surviving military defeat. In 1975, a team of mountain climbers exploring the Austrian Alps stumbled upon what appeared to be a natural cave entrance. What they found inside defied imagination, a massive underground complex that revealed Nazi Germany's contingency plans for continuing the war indefinitely. The discovery occurred during what should have been a routine climbing expedition. The entrance was so well camouflaged that it had remained hidden for 30 years. Disguised as a natural rock formation, complete with artificial weathering and strategically placed vegetation, only a structural collapse caused by spring flooding had revealed the artificial nature of the entrance. The Alpine facility, carved into solid granite, contained enough supplies and equipment to support several thousand people for years. But this wasn't simply a hiding place. It was a fully functional command center designed to coordinate resistance operations across Europe. The scale of the construction rivaled anything built during the war, suggesting that significant resources had been diverted from the war effort to complete this project. Engineering surveys of the facility revealed construction techniques that were decades ahead of their time. The main excavation had been accomplished without destroying the mountain's structural integrity, using precision blasting and advanced tunneling methods that left the external appearance completely natural. Geological analysis suggested that construction had begun as early as 1941, indicating long-term planning for the possibility of military defeat. The main complex stretched over 3 miles through the mountain, with multiple levels connected by mechanized lifts. Power was provided by an underground hydroelectric system that diverted water from mountain streams through hidden channels. The hydroelectric system was so sophisticated that it continued operating autonomously for decades after the facility was abandoned, maintaining power for essential systems throughout the complex. Ventilation systems drew fresh air through concealed intakes positioned high on the mountain slopes, while exhaust was vented through natural-appearing rock formations that dispersed heated air to avoid thermal detection. The air circulation system included filtration capabilities designed to protect inhabitants from chemical or biological attacks, suggesting preparation for extended siege conditions. Living quarters were arranged in a strict hierarchy, with luxurious apartments for high-ranking officials and basic dormitories for support staff. The luxury quarters included private bathrooms, climate control, and even entertainment areas with libraries and recreational facilities. In contrast, worker accommodations were Spartan and clearly designed for maximum occupancy rather than comfort. But perhaps most disturbing was a section designed specifically for breeding programs. Medical facilities and nursery areas suggested plans for creating a population of ideologically pure individuals who would eventually emerge to rebuild the Nazi state. The breeding program areas included educational facilities for children, suggesting plans for raising generations within the facility who would know no other world. The medical facilities within the breeding program areas were extensive and sophisticated. Obstetrics equipment, pediatric care facilities, and genetic research laboratories suggested comprehensive programs for controlling human reproduction. Documentation found in these areas included detailed plans for selecting breeding pairs based on racial and genetic criteria. Educational areas within the facility contained libraries, classrooms, and training facilities designed to preserve Nazi ideology across generations. The curriculum materials found in these areas revealed comprehensive programs for indoctrinating children from birth through adulthood, ensuring ideological purity among facility inhabitants. Communication equipment found in the facility was decades ahead of anything known to exist during the war. Radio transmission arrays, encoding devices, and document reproduction equipment suggested a network capable of coordinating operations across continents. The communication systems included relay stations positioned throughout the Alps, creating a network that could maintain contact even under adverse conditions. Maps found in sealed chambers showed locations throughout South America, Antarctica, and remote Pacific islands. These weren't simple geographical references. They were detailed operational plans showing resource deposits, strategic locations, and communication relay points. The global scope of these plans suggested coordination between multiple installations worldwide. The command center contained detailed intelligence files on Allied leadership, military capabilities, and strategic vulnerabilities. The intelligence was remarkably current and accurate, suggesting ongoing intelligence operations that extended well beyond the war's official end. Some files contained information that could only have been obtained through high-level penetration of Allied governments. The arsenal contained within the complex was staggering. Weapons stockpiles included not just conventional arms, but also prototypes of jet aircraft, rocket systems, and what appeared to be early atomic research materials. The aircraft prototypes were particularly advanced, featuring designs that wouldn't appear in mainstream aviation for decades. Storage areas contained enough supplies to support the facility's intended population for years. Food reserves, medical supplies, fuel, and raw materials were stockpiled in quantities that suggested preparation for extended isolation. The preservation systems used for these supplies were remarkably effective, with many items remaining viable when the facility was discovered. Chemical analysis of stored substances revealed compounds that wouldn't be identified by mainstream science for another 20 years. Research laboratories within the facility appeared to have been working on advanced chemistry, metallurgy, and materials science projects that pushed the boundaries of contemporary knowledge. Documentation found in the command center detailed escape routes and safe houses throughout the world. Lists of sympathizers, financial accounts, and resource caches suggested a network designed to support Nazi operations for generations. Some of these accounts, investigators discovered, remained active well into the 1970s. Financial records within the facility revealed sophisticated money management systems designed to preserve and grow Nazi assets over decades. Investment portfolios, banking relationships, and business partnerships had been established throughout the world to fund ongoing operations. The financial network was so complex that investigators spent years tracing all the connections. Perhaps most chilling was evidence of ongoing operations. Recent food supplies, updated maps, and maintenance logs suggested that the facility had been used regularly for decades after the war ended. Someone had been maintaining this complex and keeping it operational, suggesting that Nazi resistance activities had continued long after Germany's defeat. The scientific research areas within the facility contained projects that seemed to belong to science fiction. Advanced propulsion systems, atmospheric manipulation devices, and what appeared to be early computer technology suggested research programs far more advanced than anything acknowledged in official histories. Some of the research appeared to be based on principles that current science still doesn't fully understand. Personnel records found in the facility identified hundreds of individuals who had been assigned to the installation. Many of these people had disappeared at the war's end, and the facility records provided the first indication of their fate. Some had apparently lived in the facility for decades, while others had used it as a staging area for relocation to other parts of the world. But even this massive complex paled in comparison to what investigators would uncover in the remote regions of Antarctica, where Nazi expeditions had established something that challenged our understanding of the war itself. In 1947, Admiral Richard Byrd led Operation High Jump, officially described as a scientific expedition to Antarctica. What the public wasn't told was that the operation was actually a military mission designed to locate and neutralize Nazi installations on the frozen continent. The mission involved over 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, and 23 aircraft, an enormous commitment of resources for what was supposedly a mapping expedition. The scale of the operation suggested that Allied intelligence had concrete evidence of Nazi presence in Antarctica, despite official denials that persisted for decades. The existence of Nazi operations in Antarctica had been rumored throughout the war, but it wasn't until the 1980s that concrete evidence began to emerge. Satellite imagery revealed artificial structures beneath the ice that were clearly not natural formations. The structures showed geometric patterns and regular spacing that could only be the result of deliberate construction. When international teams finally gained access to these sites, what they found challenged everything historians thought they knew about Nazi capabilities. The logistics alone of establishing operations in Antarctica during the 1940s would have required resources and planning that seemed impossible given the pressures of fighting a global war. The primary installation, designated Base 211 in Nazi documents, was a massive underground complex built into a natural ice cave system. The facility was powered by geothermal energy, taking advantage of underground volcanic activity that provided both heat and power. The geothermal systems were so sophisticated that they maintained comfortable temperatures throughout the complex, even in the harsh Antarctic environment. Access to the base was through a series of hidden entrances that were nearly impossible to detect from the surface. Camouflaged vehicle access points and landing strips were carved into the ice and disguised to appear as natural formations. The construction required specialized equipment and techniques that demonstrated remarkable engineering capabilities. The facility was powered by geothermal energy and contained enough supplies to support operations for years. Climate control systems maintained livable conditions throughout the complex, while advanced water purification systems processed melted ice and geothermal water. Food storage areas contained provisions that had been carefully selected for long-term preservation in cold storage conditions. But unlike other Nazi installations, this one appeared to have been continuously occupied well after the war ended. Living quarters showed signs of recent habitation, with personal effects, updated calendars, and modern equipment that had clearly been brought to the facility after 1945. The evidence suggested that the base had served as a refuge for Nazi personnel who had successfully escaped Allied capture. The technology found at Base 211 was extraordinary. Aircraft hangars contained prototype jets with designs that wouldn't appear in mainstream aviation for decades. The aircraft used propulsion systems that defied conventional understanding, with some appearing capable of vertical takeoff and landing, despite lacking visible rotors or conventional jet engines. Propulsion systems used principles that current science still struggles to explain. Some of the aircraft appeared to be capable of vertical takeoff and landing, with flight characteristics that defied conventional understanding. Engine components used materials and design principles that were decades ahead of known technology. Research laboratories within the complex focused on Antarctic geology and atmospheric studies, but also contained equipment for what appeared to be advanced physics experiments. Particle accelerators, magnetic field generators, and other exotic machinery suggested research into fundamental forces of nature that went far beyond anything acknowledged in official scientific literature. The geological research areas contained extensive mineral surveys and mapping data that revealed detailed knowledge of Antarctica's resource deposits. The surveys identified locations of rare earth elements, oil deposits, and other valuable resources that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science for decades. The thoroughness of these surveys suggested extensive exploration activities that had been conducted in complete secrecy. Living quarters showed evidence of long-term occupation. Personal effects, updated calendars, and recent food supplies indicated that the base had been active well into the post-war period. Some areas showed signs of hasty evacuation, as if the occupants had left suddenly and recently, possibly in response to the increasing international attention to Antarctic activities. The residential areas were designed for extended habitation, with recreational facilities, libraries, and workshop areas that suggested a self-contained community. The psychological aspects of long-term isolation had been carefully considered, with areas designed for social interaction and mental health maintenance. Navigation charts found in the command center showed detailed maps of underground tunnel systems that connected multiple installations across Antarctica. The scope of the network was staggering. What had been discovered was apparently just one node in a continent-spanning operation. The tunnel systems allowed movement between installations without surface exposure, maintaining operational security even under satellite surveillance. The mapping data revealed installations positioned at strategic locations across the continent, suggesting a comprehensive territorial claim that had been established through actual occupation rather than just theoretical assertion. The positioning of these installations demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Antarctica's geography and strategic importance. Communication logs revealed contact with installations in South America, suggesting an escape network that allowed Nazi personnel to move between continents undetected. Coded messages referenced ongoing operations and resource transfers that continued for years after Germany's official surrender. The communication systems used advanced encryption methods that remained secure for decades. Radio equipment found in the facility was capable of long-range communication with installations worldwide. Antenna systems were disguised as natural ice formations, while transmission protocols used sophisticated encryption methods that allowed secure communication across vast distances. Weather monitoring equipment at the base collected detailed atmospheric and climate data that was far more comprehensive than any official weather station. The data suggested research into weather modification and atmospheric control techniques that were decades ahead of acknowledged capabilities. The biological research areas contained specimens and equipment that raised disturbing questions. Genetic samples from around the world, advanced breeding programs, and what appeared to be experiments in human adaptation to extreme environments suggested research into creating populations capable of surviving in harsh conditions. Cryogenic storage facilities contained biological samples that had been preserved for decades, including genetic material from various ethnic groups and what appeared to be experimental subjects. The preservation techniques used were remarkably advanced, maintaining sample viability far longer than contemporary methods would have allowed. But perhaps most unsettling were the astronomical observations and calculations found throughout the facility. Star charts, planetary motion calculations, and advanced telescopes suggested research into celestial mechanics and space travel that was decades ahead of acknowledged capabilities. The astronomical data included detailed calculations for space navigation and what appeared to be launch trajectory planning. The space research areas contained equipment for rocket development and what appeared to be early satellite technology. Prototype components suggested research into space-based communication and observation systems that wouldn't be developed by mainstream science for years. Observatory equipment included telescopes and tracking systems that were far more advanced than anything publicly acknowledged during the 1940s. The astronomical data collected at the facility demonstrated knowledge of celestial mechanics that was decades ahead of official scientific understanding. However, the Antarctic installations were not the end of Nazi hiding places. In the mountains of South America, investigators would uncover evidence of the most sophisticated escape network in human history, a network that had been operating in plain sight for decades. The capture of Adolf Eichmann in Argentina in 1960 was just the tip of the iceberg. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, investigators began uncovering evidence of a massive network of Nazi installations throughout South America that had been operating continuously since the war's end. The discovery began with a seemingly routine real estate transaction in the Andes Mountains. When surveyors examined a property deed, they found references to underground installations that weren't shown on any maps. Investigation revealed a complex that rivaled anything found in Europe, but this one had been built after the war ended. The main facility, hidden in the Chilean mountains, contained modern equipment and recent documentation. Unlike the hastily abandoned installations found in Europe, this complex showed signs of careful planning and long-term operation. Power systems, communication arrays, and life support equipment were all state-of-the-art for the 1970s. What made this discovery particularly disturbing was evidence of ongoing research programs. Laboratories contained modern equipment for genetic research, chemical analysis, and biological studies. Research notes were dated well into the 1980s, suggesting that Nazi scientific programs had continued uninterrupted for decades after the war. The facility's inhabitants had maintained detailed records of their activities. Personnel files, operational reports, and correspondence revealed a community of several hundred people who considered themselves to be the true government of Germany in exile. They maintained their own courts, issued their own passports, and operated their own financial system. Training areas within the complex suggested preparation for future operations. Military equipment, weapons stockpiles, and tactical planning documents indicated that this wasn't simply a hiding place. It was a staging area for eventual return to power. Maps of European cities contained detailed invasion plans and target lists. The network extended far beyond this single installation. Communication logs revealed contact with similar facilities throughout Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru. Financial records showed a sophisticated system for moving money and resources between installations, funded by art treasures, gold reserves, and business investments that generated ongoing income. Perhaps most troubling was evidence of recruitment and expansion. The community had been actively seeking new members, particularly scientists, military personnel, and technical specialists. Recruitment materials found in major South American cities suggested a network of sympathizers and supporters throughout the continent. Educational facilities within the complex revealed efforts to indoctrinate a new generation. Schools, libraries, and training programs were designed to preserve Nazi ideology and prepare future leaders. Children born in the facility were being raised with the expectation that they would eventually lead a resurgent Nazi movement. Medical facilities contained evidence of continued human experimentation. Research into aging, disease resistance, and genetic enhancement suggested that the programs begun during the war had not only continued, but had become more sophisticated with access to modern technology. But the South American network was only part of a global operation. In the forests of Germany itself, investigators would uncover evidence that suggested Nazi operations had never truly ended. In 1994, construction workers renovating a castle in Bavaria made a discovery that would rewrite our understanding of Nazi documentation and planning. Behind a false wall in the castle's foundation, they found a climate-controlled archive containing over 500,000 documents that had been hidden since 1945. The castle itself had an unremarkable post-war history, having served as a displaced persons camp, local government offices, and finally as a cultural center. None of the building's occupants over 5 decades had suspected that beneath their feet lay one of the most significant document collections in modern history. The discovery was entirely accidental. Workers installing new heating systems noticed that interior measurements didn't match exterior dimensions, leading to the investigation that revealed the hidden archive. The archive was a treasure trove of Nazi planning documents, but not the kind historians expected to find. Rather than wartime records, These documents detailed post-war operations, escape plans, and long-term strategic goals. The implications were staggering. Nazi leadership had been planning for defeat and preparing for continuation of their movement throughout the war. The documents were organized with typical German efficiency, cataloged and cross-referenced in a system that allowed easy access to related materials. The filing system included multiple backup copies of critical documents, suggesting that this archive was part of a larger network of document repositories designed to preserve Nazi organizational knowledge. Storage conditions within the archive were sophisticated for the 1940s, with humidity control, temperature regulation, and chemical preservation methods that had maintained document integrity for 50 years. The preservation techniques were so effective that many documents appeared to have been filed just days before their discovery. Financial records within the archive revealed a sophisticated system for preserving Nazi assets. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, and business partnerships had been established throughout the world, designed to fund future operations. Some of these accounts contained millions of dollars and had been generating income for decades, creating a self-sustaining financial network that could support Nazi operations indefinitely. The financial documentation included detailed instructions for accessing hidden assets, transferring funds through secure channels, and maintaining operational security while conducting business transactions. The financial network was designed to operate independently of traditional banking systems, using precious metals, artwork, and other valuable assets as backing for transactions. Investment strategies found in the archive showed remarkable sophistication, with diversified portfolios designed to generate steady income while minimizing risk of detection. The investments included legitimate businesses, real estate holdings, and financial instruments that provided steady returns while maintaining complete anonymity for the actual owners. Personnel files contained detailed information about Nazi officials who had successfully escaped capture. Current addresses, false identities, and operational assignments revealed a network of fugitives who had been living under assumed names throughout the world. Some of these individuals were discovered to be living in plain sight in Allied countries, having successfully established new identities and integrated into local communities. The personnel records included not just basic identification information, but also detailed psychological profiles, skill assessments, and assignment histories that allowed the network to make optimal use of each individual's capabilities. The records were updated regularly, suggesting ongoing contact and coordination between network members. Identity documentation found in the archive included blank passports, birth certificates, and other official documents from various countries, along with detailed instructions for creating convincing false identities. The forgery capabilities suggested access to official document sources, or the ability to create documents that were indistinguishable from authentic ones. The most disturbing documents related to long-term planning. Strategic assessments predicted the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of international terrorism, and global economic instability. These predictions, made during the war, proved remarkably accurate, suggesting a level of strategic thinking that historians had not previously recognized in Nazi leadership. Political analysis found in the archive included detailed studies of post-war political developments, social trends, and economic conditions in various countries. The analysis was used to identify opportunities for Nazi influence and infiltration, with specific recommendations for taking advantage of political instability and social unrest. The strategic planning documents included timelines extending decades into the future, with specific milestones and objectives for different phases of Nazi resurgence. The plans were designed to be flexible and adaptable, with contingency options for various political and economic scenarios. Research proposals found in the archive detailed programs for developing advanced technology, biological weapons, and mind control techniques. While some of these projects seemed like science fiction, supporting documentation suggested that serious resources had been devoted to their development. The research proposals included detailed budgets, personnel requirements, and expected outcomes. Technology development programs outlined in the archive focused on areas that were decades ahead of mainstream science. Advanced computing, genetic engineering, and psychological manipulation techniques were priorities for research and development, suggesting that Nazi scientists had identified key areas for future technological advantage. Scientific research networks described in the archive included connections with researchers and institutions worldwide, some of which continued operating after the war under different auspices. The network was designed to continue Nazi research programs through legitimate scientific channels while maintaining ideological control over the research objectives. Communication protocols within the archive revealed a global network of sleeper agents and sympathizers. Code systems, contact procedures, and operational guidelines suggested an organization capable of coordinating activities across continents while maintaining absolute secrecy. The communication systems included multiple layers of security and backup procedures to ensure continuity of operations. Intelligence networks described in the archive included penetration of government agencies, religious organizations, and cultural institutions throughout the world. The intelligence operations were designed to gather information, influence policy decisions, and create opportunities for Nazi advancement through legitimate channels. The archive also contained detailed intelligence reports on Allied leadership, including personal information, psychological profiles, and strategic assessments. The depth and accuracy of this intelligence suggested penetration of Allied governments at the highest levels, with ongoing intelligence operations that continued well after the war's end. Blackmail and coercion materials found in the archive included detailed dossiers on political leaders, military officers, and influential civilians throughout the world. The materials were designed to provide leverage for influencing decisions and policies in ways that would benefit Nazi objectives. Perhaps most troubling were the succession plans. Documents outlined procedures for transferring leadership, maintaining organizational structure, and continuing operations across generations. The Nazi movement had been designed to survive indefinitely, with provisions for adaptation and evolution as circumstances changed. Leadership development programs described in the archive included detailed selection criteria, training programs, and advancement procedures for developing future Nazi leaders. The programs were designed to identify and cultivate individuals who could effectively lead the movement through different phases of its development. Ideological preservation materials within the archive included detailed instructions for maintaining Nazi beliefs and principles across generations, even under circumstances where open expression of Nazi ideology would be impossible. The instructions included techniques for embedding Nazi principles in seemingly neutral educational and cultural programs. Cultural preservation materials within the archive revealed efforts to maintain Nazi ideology through art, literature, and education. Manuscripts, recordings, and educational curricula were designed to preserve the movement's core beliefs and transmit them to future generations. The cultural programs were sophisticated propaganda efforts designed to appear as legitimate cultural activities while actually serving to indoctrinate participants. Educational materials found in the archive included complete curricula for schools, universities, and professional training programs designed to promote Nazi ideology through seemingly neutral educational content. The educational programs were designed to influence thinking patterns and value systems while avoiding obvious political indoctrination. But even these extensive archives were overshadowed by one final discovery that would challenge our understanding of Nazi technological capabilities and raise disturbing questions about how much of their advanced research had been successfully hidden from Allied investigators. In 2003, renovations at a former Luftwaffe airfield in eastern Germany revealed a hidden underground complex beneath a camouflaged hangar. Inside were aircraft prototypes that defied World War II-era capabilities. Disc-shaped vehicles with vertical takeoff, no visible propulsion, and flight characteristics beyond known aerodynamics. The construction and materials used were decades ahead of their time, some unidentifiable with standard analysis. Flight test documents describe speeds and maneuvers previously thought impossible. Engineering files detailed exotic propulsion concepts like anti-gravity, electromagnetic manipulation, and early nuclear drives. Power systems generated massive energy from compact units without visible fuel sources, based on principles still unrecognized by mainstream physics. The site also contained advanced computing equipment, featuring parallel processing, AI concepts, and software systems more advanced than what became common until the 1980s. Data storage systems used magnetic and optical principles that allowed enormous amounts of information to be stored in compact formats. The storage systems were designed to maintain data integrity for extended periods. with backup and redundancy systems that ensured information preservation even under adverse conditions. Weapons prototypes within the cache included directed energy weapons, electromagnetic pulse devices, and what appeared to be early laser systems. Test results and operational manuals suggested that some of these weapons had been successfully deployed, though historical records contain no mention of their use. The weapons demonstrated capabilities that wouldn't appear in mainstream military systems for decades. Energy weapons found in the facility could produce effects ranging from personnel incapacitation to vehicle destruction, using focused electromagnetic radiation and particle beam technology. The weapons were compact enough for individual operation, while producing effects equivalent to conventional explosive weapons. Defensive systems included electromagnetic field generators that could disrupt electronic equipment and deflect incoming projectiles using magnetic fields. The defensive technologies suggested research into creating protective barriers using controlled electromagnetic fields rather than physical armor. The most disturbing discovery was evidence of psychological warfare research. Devices for broadcasting specific radio frequencies, chemical compounds for behavior modification, and techniques for mass hypnosis suggested programs designed to control human behavior on a massive scale. The psychological warfare equipment could affect large populations through targeted broadcasts and environmental manipulation. Mind control research found in the facility included studies of brainwave manipulation, chemical behavior modification, and psychological conditioning techniques that were far more sophisticated than anything acknowledged in mainstream psychology. The research appeared to be focused on methods for controlling both individual behavior and mass population responses. Social engineering programs described in the research documents included techniques for manipulating public opinion, creating social unrest, and directing political movements through carefully orchestrated psychological operations. The programs were designed to influence entire societies while maintaining the appearance of natural social and political developments. Research into atomic energy was far more advanced than previously known. Nuclear reactor designs, uranium enrichment techniques, and weapons blueprints indicated that Nazi atomic research had progressed much further than Allied intelligence had realized. Only the war's end had prevented deployment of nuclear weapons that were apparently close to completion. Nuclear weapons research included not just basic atomic bomb designs, but also advanced concepts for hydrogen weapons, nuclear-powered aircraft, and radiological weapons designed to contaminate large areas with radioactive materials. The nuclear research was remarkably sophisticated, incorporating principles that wouldn't be fully understood by mainstream science for years. Reactor technology found in the facility included designs for compact, high-efficiency nuclear power systems that could be used in aircraft, submarines, and mobile installations. The reactor designs were decades ahead of contemporary nuclear technology, with safety systems and efficiency ratings that exceeded modern nuclear plants. Medical technology within the facility included life support systems, surgical equipment, and biological research tools that were decades ahead of contemporary medical science. Some of the equipment appeared designed for human enhancement and life extension rather than traditional medical treatment. The medical research focused on augmenting human capabilities rather than simply treating illness and injury. Genetic research equipment found in the facility included tools for DNA analysis, genetic modification, and biological engineering that wouldn't be available to mainstream science until the 1990s. The genetic research appeared to be focused on enhancing human physical and mental capabilities through controlled genetic modification. Life extension research included studies of aging processes, cellular regeneration, and biological immortality that were far more advanced than contemporary medical understanding. The research suggested that Nazi scientists had made significant progress toward extending human lifespan and enhancing physical capabilities. The preservation of this technology was remarkable. Climate-controlled storage areas, maintenance equipment, and detailed preservation protocols had kept the prototypes in working condition for decades after the war. Some of the devices appeared to have been tested and operated regularly, suggesting ongoing maintenance and development activities. Maintenance logs showed the facility's equipment was regularly tested and maintained well after World War II, suggesting continued development. Documents outlined plans for mass production, with factory blueprints, supply chains, and timelines indicating readiness for industrial-scale deployment. The manufacturing processes described were far more advanced than anything officially acknowledged, involving exotic materials and specialized facilities. Supply chain records linked to companies across occupied Europe, many of which remained active post-war, hinted at continued technological development through legitimate channels. Nearby testing sites included sophisticated facilities capable of evaluating technologies that defied conventional science. Altogether, the findings raise unsettling questions about the post-war survival of Nazi technology and its possible influence on modern advancements. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more history documentaries.